Good afternoon, this is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer, and it's great to have you on the show today, being with me, listening to this, and watching this. I am drinking, thanks to my good buddy Peter Stabler and his lovely wife Yuan, I'm drinking Taiwanese oolong tea, which is semi-oxidized, and this is Tie Guanyin, which is Iron Buddha tea, and so it's really good for my incredibly allergy-scratchy throat. All right, today's podcast is, I think, really important. There are so many hyperlinks. Go to the original YouTube recording, the original SoundCloud recording, or go to my column page, blog page, to get the hyperlink to the article so that you can see all that I'm talking about. There's also a pretty cool visual up at the top. All right. Keeping it hot in that thermos until I drink it to kill the itchiness in my throat. The West attacks China's social credit system to deflect from its fascist panopticon. Pictured above the Panopticon, Illinois State Prison in Joliet. For every Westerner out there, just look out your window. It's even worse. Your every move, every communication and transaction, monetary and otherwise, is being tracked, recorded, and stored by a faceless, multi-layered, fascist, corporate government octopus. 180 degrees to the east in China, it's all posted on the internet, TV, and print media for every citizen to follow and comment on, upon which Baba Beijing, the Chinese leadership, will respond in kind. Now, that's what I call real participatory democracy. All right, I'm going to be taking a lot of sips today. My throat is really scratchy. Here's the podcast. Western propaganda brilliantly and ceaselessly employs what is known as psychological reflection. This is a mental health term, meaning that if you are guilty of being a pedophile or tax cheat, for example, you get on your soapbox about the evils of child molestation or financial crooks, respectively, while doing exactly that. Another great example is homophobia. Many homophobes, especially the most violent ones, are repressed, closeted gays and lesbians who internally loathe themselves. Be it war, invasions, occupation, genocide, massacres, exterminations, institutionalized corruption, election fraud, pollution, CIA drug cartels, CIA organized crime, ad nauseum. The West aggressively attacks all of its enemies for being guilty of these and the rest of the world's criminality, when in fact Eurangloland is the most brazen and bald-faced global enemy number one in every one of these categories, with the rest of humanity being its long-suffering victims. Sadly, the West's psychological reflection works so well that its endless tsunami of shameless lies and propaganda continues to win over the long term. Just look at how Eurangloland has completely perverted the opinions of the vast majority of the world's people, at least those who do not live in communist socialist countries, when it comes to Russia, the Russian people, and its president, Vladimir Putin. Ditto Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, abbreviated DPRK, Cuba, the Philippines, and any other country or its leader that does not allow itself to be a craven whore for capitalist empire. The effectiveness of Western psychological reflection in the mainstream media is so thorough that people I know who should see through this withering fog of propaganda are completely brainwashed. I call it being behind the great Western firewall. Yet most Westerners I know who live overseas are just as clueless. due to their innate sense of racial superiority and their unwillingness to look beyond CIA, MI6, CNN, New York Times, BBC, The Economist, and all the other rubber stamp ventriloquist dummies that shill for their deep state masters. It is a demoralizing fact of life, something I passionately wrote about in book number 2 of the China trilogy, China Rising, Capitalist Roads, Socialist Destinations. Euranglo-land's owners are throwing everything they have trying to destroy Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and DPRK. Let's call them the Fearless Four, and too many others to name, and it's not working as planned. You may notice that 3 of these 4 countries are some of the biggest hydrocarbon producers in the solar system, and that's what the West's elites really want to do, is bring down their respective governments and install puppet Boris Yeltsins to commence with the rape of their citizens and plunder of their natural resources. It's called capitalism if you haven't already figured it out or have yet to reluctantly accept the truth. After 500 years of global tyranny and dictatorship, cracks in Western Empire's game plan are starting to show. The Fearless Four keep exposing Westerners for the racist buffoons and ideological zealots that they are. Almost nothing is working as planned near home base Europe. Just check out Russia and Iran. And America, check out Venezuela. Even North Korea's very astute Kim Jong-un is besting the West on the diplomatic front, having gotten Trump to agree to a joint summit. How much worse can it get for Western Empire? It must be time to bomb into the Middle Ages, another country, or invade a small, helpless, poorly defended country full of dark-skinned people. Like Iraq, how about Grenada too? That'll keep the beer and popcorn flowing in front of Westerners' 25% interest installment plan purchased widescreen TVs for a few days of Hunger Games bread and circuses. Way out east, oh my God, along comes Baba Beijing, China's leadership, to really make a mess for Euranglo-land. It too continues to run circles around racist, greedy, and let's face it, incredibly stupid and hubristic Westerners, at least the deep state and its stooges who occupy positions of power in its democratic puppet governments. Thus, the mainstream media Wehrmacht undoubtedly has on the boards to try to bring down Baba Beijing, but it is being held up. Why? 3's a company and the Fearless Four are already a crowd. You can only spread your resources of destruction and chaos so far. As any good fascist will tell you, the big lie means staying focused and relentlessly on message. Given with how it's currently playing out and knowing the ultimate goal is taking control of these others' human and natural resources, the propaganda tsunami against the Fearless Four is already reaching the point of diminishing marginal returns. Adding a 5th behemoth target like China, which is just as savvy as the Fearless Four, has probably been deemed too much by the West's owners. Therefore, Baba Beijing has gotten off pretty lightly up to now compared to the fascist big lie against the Fearless Four. But in the interim, that still doesn't mean China gets off scot-free. The CIA MI6 mainstream media juggernaut sees a chink in China's armor. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that awful off-color pun. With its rapidly developing Chinese social credit system known as the CSCS or just the SCS. Patrice Granville, editor-in-chief of the Granville Post, sent to Godfrey Roberts and me a hatchet piece about CSCS. It originally came from Reuters, a CIA MI6 chop shop from way back. James Corbett has a rabid, irrational fear of all things Chinese, socialism, communism, so he piled on. Then Forbidden Knowledge ran with Corbett's propaganda video, adding insult to injury. Corbett is so cartoonishly bad about this subject, I even commented on it in China Rising, Capitalist Road, Socialist Destinations. It's too bad because otherwise he does some really good journalism. But then again, liberal, progressive, alternative journalists who have epileptic seizures at the mere whiff of China, socialism, communism, or false flags are a Jinping 1,000. It takes courage and conviction to look outside your own bigoted ideological blinders, to admit that there are different points of view, and squirm in your seats, smoking gun evidence. I don't want to see it. I sometimes wonder if journos like this get PayPal hongbao, red envelopes full of money given during Chinese New Year, from Langley and Vauxhall Cross to post anti-Chinese propaganda. Or maybe they are just your plain vanilla subconscious racists. Forbidden Knowledge possibly didn't notice it, but they allowed Godfrey's thoughtful and reasoned riposte to be published below their piece. If they nuke it, I have posted it below, safe for posterity. In closing, here is a prime example of the difference between the West's real-life fascist panopticon versus China's open, honest, and forthright social credit system. This month, China Central Television, CCTV, cooperated with Tencent Research to do a national survey talking to 8,000 citizens. The results were broadcast on CCTV, picked up by all the print and social media, and it was the topic of the country for a few days. Why? Because 76.3% of the respondents think that some kinds of AI, artificial intelligence, are a threat to their privacy. As the world's largest user of surveys and polls, parenthetically, I wrote a whole chapter on this in China Rising, and here is an article that touches on it. I can guarantee that the results of this poll and many others like it were/are put on President Xi Jinping's desk, as well as in the hands of thousands of other decision makers in China's government. Unlike the West, Beijing and Chinese democracy are proactively responsive to the citizens' concerns, hopes, and aspirations. Thousands of poll results are synthesized, analyzed, and end up in laws passed and policies changed. China's is real people's democracy, not the elitist Potemkin Western version. Herewith are Godfrey Roberts' comment about the Reuters/Corbett report /Forbidden Knowledge fear-mongering yarn about China's SCS. It is a great combo with my aforementioned article on the same subject. I would like to preface Godfrey by saying that in the CSCS, if you have substantial back taxes, delinquent loans, unpaid financial court settlements, and the like, you can be banned from flying or taking costly or high-speed trains here. They may even take your passport. The logic being, if you can afford to buzz all over the place, then why can't you pay your debts? These are usually well-heeled citizens who have the assets to live the high life. They can always drive their chauffeured cars on China's 131,000 kilometers of motorways, more than any other country in the world. I have never heard of not being able to take the metro or standard trains unless you are out of prison or on parole. These kinds of restrictions and much more onerous ones are put on citizens in the West. The United States is now routinely imprisoning poor people who owe money, East St. Louis being just one of many examples. That's just the tip of the American iceberg for loss of freedoms and due process. The Oklahoma Department of Education, ODE, refuses to give me my updated teacher certificate because I have sent in my tax returns to the IRS 3 times, and due to its incompetence, my returns have never been officially registered in its database. Last summer, I even went to the Oklahoma Tax Commission and hand-delivered my returns to them, but that's not good enough. The feds say no go, so I'm out $50 at ODE for nothing but frustration and insults. These kinds of governmental limits on freedom and due process are legendary in the West. I lived and worked in France for 5 years, often preying on the powerless, voiceless, and dark-skinned members of society. As Godfrey explains below, the Chinese are getting legal recourse for the CSCS. I know experientially that they already have it in local courts for small claim redresses because I threatened to sue my landlord in Beijing and he backed down. A true life story I detailed in China is Communist, Damn It, Dawn of the Red Dynasty. So here's Godfrey's turn. I'm not going to try to change my voice. I'm not a voice actor. No. China's very public social credit program is not America's very secret no-fly list. Not even close. Our media are interpreting yet another Chinese policy, social credit in Western terms, but China does things differently and usually better. First, social credit is a popular initiative. The Chinese are the most trusting society on earth, yet don't have credit ratings, so they're tired of being scammed online for billions each year. Next, they trust the government, not private credit agencies like Equifax, to run projects that impact everyone because they trust their government far more than we trust ours. 86% of them say it works for everybody and not just for the fortunate few. Second, social credit doesn't just rate citizens, it rates everyone from government departments and individual officials to cops, corporations, Supreme Court justices, Congress people. Absolutely everyone and every enterprise gets a social credit rating that arises naturally from their interactions with others. Third, doesn't this sound better than being secretly rated by private corporations who sell your information to other private corporations and secretly share it with government agencies without your permission? And charge us for access to our own information? And offer no reciprocity? Ask TRW for a vendor's credit history and current rating and see what it costs you. Fourth, social credit is 90% carrot and 10% stick. The higher your score, the easier your life becomes. Japan and the Netherlands already offer expedited visa processing for tourists with scores above 750, and landlords and car rentals waive deposits if you're over 800. It's intended to be a magic carpet for those who play straight with everyone they encounter. Fifth, all the rules are public and anyone can play, and all changes to your SC rating are transparent to you in real time for free. Sixth, China already has a prototype running, an online social credit arbitration court where, for a few dollars, you can have your case heard and receive a binding verdict that corrects mistakes. Millions of people use it and are refining it. It will go national in the year 2020. Seventh, there's an idealistic element. It's part of China's 2,000-year-old plan to create Datong, D-A-T-O-N-G, society in which, to be brief, everybody is taken care of and nobody needs to lock their doors at night. A goal every Chinese supports and which the government hopes to deliver by the year 2120. Imagine the effects of 100 years of social credit on the entire culture. Customers applying for visas for developed countries like Luxembourg or Japan with scores above 750 need not submit bank records and enjoy perks like expedited airport security checks. This is a consumer's magic carpet that reduces transaction fees and credit losses and builds consumer confidence. By 2018, more than 1,100 government officials had been blacklisted. More carrot than stick. The corporations with strong social credit can expect government contracts and low-interest loans, and raises small corporations' credit if they observe consumer and product safety regulations while debiting them for unreliability, dishonesty, excess emissions, and even poor worker safety. Regulators say that when the system becomes integrated, it will generate corporate scorecards directly from sensor data, CCTV cameras, closed-circuit television cameras, government and court records, and consumer reviews. The program comes with a sting in its tail, as Oxford University's Rogier Cremers says, quote, "When rules are broken and not rectified in time, you are entered in a list of, quote, people subject to enforcement for trust breaking, end of quote, and denied access to things. Rules broken by corporations can lead them to being unable to issue corporate bonds and individuals being unable to become company directors. Trust breakers can face penalties on subsidies, career progression, asset ownership, and the ability to receive honorary titles from the Chinese government. Those who fail to repay debts are punished by travel restrictions," end of quote. A typical travel restriction made the news in 2017 when a real estate developer attempted to book a first-class ticket to London and found that the system would only issue him a tourist seat. When he investigated, he found that his restrictions stemmed from several court judgments whose penalties he had not paid. By 2018, the People's Court had banned 6 million defaulters from traveling by air and was working with government departments to ensure that they would be limited on multiple levels, as it was quoted. A local court got creative. When someone calls a delinquent debtor in Dongfeng, Henan province, instead of a ringtone, they hear, "The person you are calling is listed as dishonest by the Dongfeng People's Court. Please urge them to fulfill their obligations." End of recording when you call that guy or gal. Social credit gives consumers the same access to corporate and government ratings as corporations and governments have to consumers and make a highly trusting society transparent. Since it will be operational by 2020 and will doubtless arouse Western fears of Orwellian control, here is the official summary of the State Council's basic plan for establishing and improving systems of joint incentives for trustworthiness. Straight from the record's mouth. I actually referenced this in my article, my aforementioned article, that people could link to the whole thing. But Godfrey's done a nice job of taking out, the essence of what it's supposed to do. It is to praise creditworthiness, discipline untrustworthiness, fully utilize credit incentives and constraints, increasing the extent of incentives for trustworthy entities and of disciplinary actions for seriously untrustworthy entities, letting the trustworthy receive benefits and the untrustworthy be subject to restrictions, forming systemic mechanisms for praising honesty and disciplining untrustworthiness. Coordinate departmental and social action by disclosing and sharing credit information, establish cross-region, interdepartmental, and cross-sector mechanisms for joint incentives and joint disciplinary action, forming a common governance structure in which government departments coordinate their concerted action, industry organizes self-discipline and management, credit service organizations actively participate, all broadly supervised by public opinion. Protect rights and interests in accordance with laws and regulations. Strictly follow laws, regulations, and policies to scientifically delineate trustworthy and untrustworthy conduct, develop joint incentives for trustworthiness, and joint disciplinary action for untrustworthiness. Establish complete mechanisms for credit restoration, objections, appeals, and so forth to protect all participants' lawful rights and interests. Focus on key points, coordinate advancement. Persist in being problem-oriented, striving to resolve credit issues in key industries that are currently harmful to the public interest and public safety, on which many people have given strong feedback, all those polls and surveys I was telling you about, or which have caused serious negative impacts on social and economic development. Encourage and support innovations and demonstrations by local people's governments and relevant departments, and gradually expand mechanisms for jointly incentivizing trustworthiness and jointly discipline untrustworthiness to every area of the economy and society. End of extract from the government announcement about the social credit system. Godfrey sums it up by saying, "This is another big Chinese experiment, a revolutionary way for people and institutions to relate to one another, so let's give it a chance. Who knows? We might learn something." This is Jeff J. Brown closing out China Rising Radio Sinoland in Shenzhen. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.